How to find new opportunities. So, Sustainable Wealth Secrets is about increasing your wealth in a way that is sustainable. And so, there got to be certain methodologies in order to find new opportunities for investing for passive income or investing in general. I'm Justin Hitt with Sustainable Wealth Secrets. And there actually is a methodology that I use and I've seen other investors use. In fact, when I was in a private investment club, we would discuss these opportunities, and they taught me this particular methodology for tracking, identifying, and then investing in new opportunity. So I'm going to share 3 new opportunities I see today because there's a lot of doom and gloom out there, and folks are concerned about the future, especially here in the United States, but all across the world, there is a long-term recession. And it's often believed that the recessions is the time of withdrawal and higher expenses, but it's also where the seeds of necessity produce new opportunity. And we'll explain that here in a little bit. But there are 3 projects that we'll talk about that are on the horizon as being game-changing when it comes to our life, liberties, happiness, access to resources. But first, how do you find these opportunities? Well, what it was taught to me is to always keep an open ear, and even though if things are really bad, look for those seeds of opportunity that are being planted in times of necessity. What does that mean? Well, right now, economically, inflation is super high in the United States, Europe, all across the world. There's a war going on that's caused sanctions on energy resources. And so these constraints in the marketplace, which would be fuel affordability, access to energy, and then ultimately the supply chain disruptions, what does that necessitate? What is that causing to happen? And when we look at what it causes to happen, which, for example, Germany, energy prices are higher than they've ever been. The United States, we have limited access to food. I don't know if you've noticed, but the whole fat milk is not readily available at the marketplace. Buttermilk, things like that. High cream products are not available in the marketplace. And that's because the limited supply of milk has caused the producers of milk to skim that fat and use it in butter and other products. Now that happens in every market. They skim the fat in order to implement it elsewhere. So in the steel industry right now, with all the environmental restrictions on coal, steel production is down. Steel production being down is going to necessitate looking for alternative ways to smelt steel or to turn steel into new product. One such way is to recycle more steel in the environment. Now, in the United States, they used to ship all that steel, pig steel and all the waste materials over to China, and China would process it, but China decided they weren't going to process it anymore. And so that material has been backing up in the United States where there is no infrastructure for processing. So that introduces our first potential new solution that would be highly profitable in the marketplace, a great passive income, and an opportunity for you to keep your eye on. Now, I know I synthetically kind of walk through there, but when it was taught to me, it's kind of a mind map. So if this, then that is what we go through in that series. If energy prices go up in the context of the steel industry, then they might do this other thing or that other thing. So what are we talking about here? Green hydrogen. So right now, an alternative to coal in the steel production process is to use hydrogen in order to smelt the materials necessary to produce steel or to recycle steel. You need to have an influx of steel to recycle, and you need to have an influx of hydrogen. Where does hydrogen come from? Well, currently hydrogen comes from fracking. So literally the petroleum industry creates the hydrogen that they're using. So instead of coal, it's petroleum. And you might be saying, well, that's bad. Well, the pressure of it being bad causes them to seek out alternative solutions, which would be green hydrogen, which could be produced through electrolysis. It could be produced by other means. And of course, green hydrogen, the concept is, which would be hydrogen that doesn't use petroleum product, is being heavily researched in the EU. Not being heavily researched in the United States. So again, we have to look outside of our comfort zone if you're in the US, or to look harder at what may seem to be a shitty environment in the EU. Do you see how this works? Now, I'm not going to go through the decision tree on each of these elements because you can reverse engineer this once you hear the opportunity. But what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, it seems bad right now, but what does this bad situation necessitate? So the Great Depression necessitated better banking laws and better approaches at banking, less speculation. The COVID crisis, locking people down at home, facilitated other electronic media. Unfortunately, these things can facilitate good and bad stuff because it also facilitated better tracking with mobile devices. But the point I'm making here is the opportunity is neutral to the outcome, and then you can decide where you're going to invest. You may be saying, well, I'd rather invest in petroleum product because we're able to extract more petroleum out of the ground now in more efficient ways, and we use less of it, so that's going to be a cash flow for a long time. It could be forestry product. We're growing better, stronger, healthier forests than we have ever grown before, and then pulp paper and other products are being produced more efficiently, so there's kind of an equilibrium there where you can have a consistent cash flow from pulp, paper, and trees. See, it doesn't really matter what people are complaining about in the public because complaints could be to drive the price up. Because coal could be a good investment because of all the environmental concerns. It's driven the price of coal up because federal government has reduced the number of licensing. Do you think they don't buy into coal before they start shutting places down? Well, that's for another discussion. But the concept here is to find the new opportunity in the ecosystem. It doesn't matter if there's blood in the streets. It doesn't matter if there's a huge boom. But ultimately, what is coming down the line? What is going to improve things? So let's talk about another thing that is really ought to put a smile on your face, which is thorium reactors. So we need electricity to do electrolysis to create hydrogen. By the way, when they take water and they apply electricity to it, it produces hydrogen and oxygen. We could use all the oxygen we can get, and we can use all the hydrogen we can get, but we need some kind of electricity to separate the two. And so thorium reactors, which is currently being researched in the EU and in use in Russia. See, that's why there's some conflict here. Should we sanction Russia to slow down their development of the thorium reactor in order to produce a better thorium reactor in the EU? See, the edge of research is on the edge of conspiracy, but ultimately we take a note, thorium reactors. Thorium reactors use radioactive materials, but a significantly less amount, and it uses that material for much longer and produces a more inert and smaller volume waste product. That waste product is not that dangerous compared to nuclear reactors, and it produces zero greenhouse gases in the entire long cycle that it creates electricity, and so compared to other products, it is a better, more green solution. Now, you've probably read my programs about greenwashing. Anything that's called green isn't necessarily better. But in comparison of the amount of electricity you can produce, the thorium reactor produces much more than our solar panels or wind or just steam generation or any other source that we have available right now, and it does it with less resources on a smaller footprint. That is an opportunity. Now, again, I gave you a little mind map about the things, and we can look at influencing factors, high energy costs in Europe. We can look at the desire to decouple from fossil fuels. We can look at the other. By the way, they're not actually fossil fuels. And I'm so conditioned to say fossil fuels. They're actually long chain hydrocarbons that are produced in the ground through enzymes and other means, plus the pressure. And there could be possibly renewable. If we had more efficient engines to run them, we could actually be using less of it. But again, the chain. Write the chain down on paper. You will identify the truths about a situation, the possible inputs, the outputs. You could do a SIPOC, for example. And we won't go into what a SIPOC is. Just look it up. SIPOC. It's not... SIPOC is not... I'm trying to edit my brain in order not to say something offensive, but here we go. It is a methodology for approaching the inputs and outputs of a process in order to determine how to more efficiently operate that process. So what we're looking at is, and we'll give the next one, lithium recycling. The problem in lithium recycling is that most lithium is mined by slaves. actual slaves and children who are slaves. And we don't want to do that. But lithium is also environmentally toxic when it's being mined, and the cobalt and other things that go into lithium batteries is environmentally toxic and has limited sources for these materials. We don't quite have a way to mechanically mine this stuff that is profitable, so we have poor countries mine it, and that's what we get. So your cell phone, if you're against slavery, you probably shouldn't have a cell phone with a lithium battery. That's one of the problems. Lithium also is not very recyclable today. Unless you're doing some homework and you're digging around and you notice a company in Arizona who can recycle lithium batteries up to 70%, and they have an input stream. Input and income are two of the same things when we're talking about sustainable wealth. But they have an input stream that includes Lowe's and Home Depot battery recycling, and they can again produce 70% of the lithium in a market-ready approach, as well as producing plastic to reuse, as well as producing other types of metals. Do you see where we're coming from here? In a time of economic distress, there is always opportunity because it facilitates opportunity. When costs go up, resources are limited, people are innovative, people find solutions. So lithium recycling gives them the opportunity to produce raw materials that can go straight into the manufacturing process. Again, you hear an idea or concept, rather than jumping on the latest stock or whatever company they're talking about, you go and build a mind map. You look at the inputs and outputs. You look at market readiness. So the outputs from lithium recycling is market ready for battery manufacturing. The process of producing hydrogen produces a hydrogen that can plug into an existing system for smelting steel or recycling steel. The thorium reactor is a one-to-one replacement for much larger nuclear reactors in producing electricity. Even the three things that I've given you here have a web of interaction. So if thorium reactors work well, they're more likely to be able to produce green hydrogen. And the plants, there will be a higher demand for lithium batteries to store that electricity. If we have better lithium batteries, we can have more electricity in the grid because we can more efficiently store it. If we have more green hydrogen, we can create the steel for vehicles that are running on batteries charged by reactors. Now, this is just one set. In my inventory of new opportunities, that we work with private clients when we talk about new opportunities, my inventory is 20 or 30 items. Now, it doesn't need to be 100 items, but it's 20 or 30 items. These three items just happen to web together really well and are easy for other people to understand. But it's that mind map, and then taking the mind map and looking at its legs and identifying inputs and outputs. Then we can go in and find the companies that are innovative in those areas. And we're not looking on general news sites. We're looking on technology sites and military sites, and we're looking at contracts. A lot of these things will be federal contracts before they're a publicly usable product. We're going to look at trends globally, not just locally. And we put all those in a system, which I use a note-taking system to do. I build the associations between the elements, and then it kind of spits out where I should be positioned. Any of these companies in a portfolio, so you maybe have 20 ideas, you might narrow it down to 5 ideas. Any one of these companies in a portfolio, we are either going to build a syndication, and so a syndication is pooling together other people's money into a company, and that company will invest in the private side of these things, because everything I mentioned here today does not. You could find source inputs to what I'm talking about today, but you're not going to find a publicly traded company. However, you'll find holding companies that accept private investors at $1 million or more, and so you can syndicate the money together and then invest and get part of the front-end upside. And I did talk about how venture capitalists work up front and how private money works in other programs. But if you have questions about that, please let me know. But can you see how we're developing? See, the world we face right now doesn't seem very nice, but we're developing a potential future world where one or more of these new opportunities may take ground, and then we're going to snowball that positive growth from, say, a thorium reactor that comes out. into the other new opportunities. So the weighting of the opportunities value in the market changes, and then we're going to make investments far ahead of the marketplace. Eventually, all this stuff will be in the news every day, and they'll create a bubble, and then the bubble will crash. But we're in long before that. That's sustainable wealth. It's being a steward of your money, applying resources in places that have high societal value, that solve big problems, and then ultimately you can get in on earlier than the consumer or the commercial investor. You want to be able to get in with the venture capitalist. You want to be able to get in with the private money. You want to get in with the equity stake rather than the long-term stake. But we're also going to syndicate the risk by working in a team, because that was the biggest lesson with the investment group, is that we didn't make decisions with just one person doing research. We did decisions with parallel research that then challenged and debated each other. We made decisions based on publicly traded companies that we could get access to versus the private company, and then we had to do secondary research to determine who could feed the opportunity, who would benefit from this new opportunity. We also had legal constraints. Being an organization, we couldn't just throw money around anywhere. I hope you've learned something today, because this is the complexity that produces wealth that cannot be taken away. Because even if one of these three things failed to work, so maybe thorium reactors become a thing that only Russians have because we've sanctioned the hell out of the country and we've decided to continue a war, then you may not be able to invest in that. And you may have to put more effort on what you can access. And of course, the green hydrogen could be a dream. It may be more efficient to produce hydrogen from petroleum, and then hydrogen may only get more expensive as petroleum is sanctioned in the types of activities used to create the hydrogen may be more difficult. I'm Justin Hitt with Sustainable Wealth Secrets. I hope this has been useful to you. I know it's a little scattered, but if you map it out on paper as I'm going through each thing, you're going to see the interconnections, the hubs and nodes, which identifies the concentration of interest, and then through that, you're going to get an opportunity. If we were doing a consultation and you were saying, hey, help me evaluate this new opportunity, we're thinking about producing a syndicate, we got $4 or $5 million together, then what we would do is we'd map all these out. So I would draw this out for you. Of course, I'm just giving this away for free, which of course, these are real opportunities, but it's example, not implementation. If you're looking for real implementation to get new opportunities in your marketplace, the methodology itself of mapping, modeling, and challenging work like magic. If you want that kind of magic in your business or in your own personal wealth building, visit www.sustainablewealthsecrets.com and ask your clarifying questions. Ask your questions that helps you better understand this technique to either implement yourself or ask my team to help implement it with you, because the opportunities do exist. No matter how horrible the world seems, that horror necessitates opportunity, whether or not that horror is real. Not that we want to produce these difficult situations, but the difficult situations are there. How do we profit from them? How do we benefit from them? How do we get over them and solve them? That's what we share here at Sustainable Wealth Secrets. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. Again, clarifying questions can be asked at www.sustainablewealthsecrets. Thanks for listening.